The 1930s image is, not inaccurate. It's just usually an exaggeration because we see the worst of it from the 1930s in the old black grainy photographs and the long red lines. And the 1930s was different for different people. And the 2030s will be different for different people too, which I imagine we'll get to. But in the larger scope, we won't have the same bread lines because we now have social programs we never had before. And we have charities that didn't exist before. And we have systems in place. We have FDIC so that if banks fail, not likely that they will, but if some fail, the government has promised to get you your money back up to $250,000. I mean, the risk to the individual is less in the 2030s than it was in the 1930s. That's not to say that the 20% unemployment won't be real painful for a lot of people, that there might not be great social stresses and whole families can be negatively impacted by a loss of jobs or reduction in wages and home foreclosures and all the rest of that. So there are those similarities. It's the ones who don't prepare for it, Bill, that are going to be the ones who are hurt the worst, the ones who go blindly into this thing. If you prepare, you're going to find there's opportunity. If you prepare, you're going to find that you can take care of your family. If you prepare, you can find yourself doing all right. You may not think it's great, but neither is it the zombie apocalypse, end of the earth type of thing that a lot of people fear. And it may be the other way around, if I may. Maybe the problem starts elsewhere and spreads to the United States, so it may not be United States caused, is the point of that. But what happens in China, which is a heavily indebted nation, or Japan, United States, United Kingdom, other heavily indebted nations, the amount of money that goes from the federal budget to pay interest payments becomes overwhelming. How can you maintain a strong military? How can you maintain social programs? How can you make good on your obligations to retirees and everything that goes along with federal spending, right? The roads and everything else. How do you do that when a major chunk of your budget has to go towards the interest? Now, one answer is borrow more. But in a time of financial crisis, that's not easy to do because interest rates are high, and after a while it's like, why would I lend to the United States or Japan when I can lend to Sweden, smaller rate of interest, and be a lot safer, no risk of default. So it becomes a difficult thing. You could raise taxes, but as you raise taxes enough to cover that, you are certainly making things difficult on businesses and on individuals. And you can only tax the wealthy so far before you can run into a strike by the wealthy. A capital strike is what it's called, and it occurred in the 1930s. Or you find yourself just taxing the wealthy and just not producing enough to take care of the problems. Either way, the government is constrained in their spending, and as they're constrained in their spending, the seeds for that are being sown now here and around the world with things like modern monetary theory, where we just spend, and think it's all good, it pays for itself. But what we're doing is we're sowing the seeds of great financial stress as we go forward. It's not just the federal government. State governments that overspend are going to be in the same boat, and they can't print money. So we have a problem that could begin in Japan or China that goes here, it could begin here and then just spreads around the world, but it is a global depression. It's hard to know for sure which programs will still be in place and which won't, because seeing the future of government is a really tough thing to do. We'd much rather stick with the economy than government. But think as a politician, which programs would you cut versus keep if you're running for office, for re-election? So you're going to try to, as much as you can, stay with the ones that are in the public view, that keeps the public fed, families together, heating bills paid, that sort of thing. I would imagine the best you can do would be that, and stop the other things that maybe are research and development, maybe foreign aid, maybe things that are behind the scenes. Maybe have to cut back on military spending or space spending or other areas where the public isn't directly impacted, and therefore your votes are not going to be directly impacted. I think there's a lot of area for that, so that a lot of the social programs people depend on will still be around. And that will obviously be a great help. And then you and I also know that civic groups, churches, and other charitable organizations do a lot of good in this country. And they're going to have an opportunity to do a lot more good as we get to that time period. If somebody's a philanthropist, just to your neighbor, if not in the larger sense, that decade is going to give you lots of opportunity to help your fellow man. And I think, maybe I'm just being Pollyannish, I think we're going to see a lot of that as we go forward. A lot of people helping people as we get through that time. Well, they're not protected per se. They do well because they're necessities. And let me give you an example. Yesterday, I was privileged to do a presentation to an HVAC national, actually their global supply chain HVAC organization. And the CEO made a very good point. He said in 2008 and 9, we didn't sell a lot of new units, but parts sold really well. And so when you think about that, when you get to the 2030s, there'll be lots of people, 70%, maybe 75, 80% still working. If their air conditioner goes down, they're not going to go, oh, well, we're not going to fix that. You're going to buy the parts. And the technician's going to get paid, and the wholesale distributor's going to get paid, the manufacturer's going to get paid, and you'll be cooler. We can't live without it anymore. That's an example of the things that will be, as you call, protected. The things that will do better are the must-haves. And so you ask yourself, what can I do without? Well, I can do without a third suit in our line of business. And in other places, I'm going to have to put off my new boots and wear these for a few more months. And you find yourself delaying necessities, but nevertheless, you do have to buy those boots eventually. But you don't have to get the car. You can buy car parts. That motorcycle, you don't need the motorcycle. That RV, forget it. Who needs a camper, right? It's one of those things where you look at life that way and you answer the question. Pharma, we're going to need pharma. Hospitals, we're going to need medical doctors, people taking care of the baby boomers, all that's going to be going on. Education's going to be going on. We're going to find, I think, a lot of innovation. As a matter of fact, our cyclical theories dictate that in the 2030s, there's going to be a boom of some kind in a technology that we can't name. I don't think we're talking EV. I think we're talking Mr. Fusion. We're talking something transformative like the computer chip was decades ago, like the cable across the Atlantic was even further back in time. Something that is just a wow, so that the millennials and the Zs will have this great new thing to rebuild and move forward. I'm going to do two kids. I got my own children who are grown, and have heard me talk about this for many years, and I have my grandchildren who are 11 years age, 10 years of age and down. So to them, I can only talk to their parents, but as we get closer, as they're getting to be 18 towards the end of this decade, I will have a message to them that says, all right, things are about to change. So you don't want to spend $100,000 a year going to college. You just don't. You don't want that kind of debt going into the Great Depression, unless college is free at that point. You want to go to a local school. And I only have granddaughters, but I would say to my granddaughters, I said, you know what? You know what's a good job for you? Become a welder. You'll be working. Become a carpenter or a plumber. You'll be working. And you can have your own business, or you can work in a trade, and you'll just get a paycheck, and you'll be happy with life as you go forward. So there will be things that we can tell them as they're getting ready to go to college. If they want to go to college to become a art major, that limits the job opportunity, so you have to have a serious conversation about that. That's the type of thing I would do with my grandchildren. With my own children, I would say, wherever you're living now, stay there. Because if you decide later this decade you're going to buy that bigger house, that newer house, then all of a sudden you're stuck with a bigger mortgage at a higher interest rate right before your income may get hurt and right before the property values go down. So you're all of a sudden, 5 years after you buy that big new home, you're upside down, you're underwater, then you're struggling to make the payments, all because you didn't stay put. And so I tell my kids, and I tell all the children, stay put. And buy the home now that you're going to live in for the next 15 years. And when you do that, you've secured your future. Next thing would be, for you and for everybody, invest as much as you possibly can in the stock market. Use the ITR Optimizer. Get ready, put in the cash and go so that you can build as much wealth as you can between now and then. Buy multifamily homes if you don't trust the stock market, but invest in the future so that you have some equity to go into the Great Depression with, because when prices fall in the Great Depression, you're going to take that cash, because you won't stay in equities, and you're going to have lots of opportunities as you go forward. You'll be able to buy a multifamily that will last you the rest of your life. You'll be able to buy a home in the outskirts of your favorite city that you can live in for the next 30 years afterward. You know, it's going to be that type of thing where if you use this decade, but if you blow this decade, if you blow it on trips and fun and fast cars and going to New York to see plays and not putting any money away, you'll have lots of good memories as you're waiting for your subsistence check. It's a matter of living simply and living generously, as we've talked about, as far as being a good person. You want to be a giving person, but you want to understand that it's a simple life. You'll still go camping with your old camper. You'll still have baseball games, the Little League. You'll still have restaurants. That'll all still be there. It's just you're not going to have these grandiose plans. You're not going to have this vision of prosperity. With 6 years of an economy going downhill, bouncing down a hill for 6 years, can you imagine the psychological pain that will bring to people? Can you just imagine how that will wear on them? And everybody's going to sound like Eeyore, you know? It's just never going to get better, never be happy again, never this, and that will tear at the fabric of your family and your work and everything around you. You have to be strong enough and know how to use leading indicators and everything that we do here to say, this too shall pass. And we just need to hang on. And as we do that together, the boat's stronger and we will move forward. But if somebody has given up hope, lost hope, those are the ones to feel bad for. And there will be millions of those, especially the aged, my group, who are living just on Social Security. That will be a painful time.